Hello and welcome to the Commander's Quarters, your Magic the Gathering source that helps you command your budget. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all their support. Hey everyone, Mitch coming in for the Commander's Quarters studio. Welcome to the show. So, on this channel, I've talked about plenty of cards and commanders that I'm excited about, ones that I can't wait to build around and play. But on today's episode, we're going to be talking about something completely different than that. Because we're going to be talking about commanders that I will never own. When you see a commander, sometimes you just know, I can't wait to build that commander, I can't wait to play with it. And sometimes you're just like, yeah, that one's not for me for whatever reason. Now, there's nothing wrong with the commander per se. You know, it's just a personal preference, a playstyle preference maybe. That you see a commander and for one reason or another, you're like, no, thank you. I'm just going to pass on this one. So I'm going to delve into a couple of the ones that I kind of immediately knew when I saw them. This one is not for me. So let's jump into it. And the first commander that I will never own is Angus McKenzie. Just kidding. That was a bad joke. Anyways, Angus McKenzie is a $200 card, so I will probably never own it. But I'm not going to be talking about commanders that I'm not going to own because of monetary reasons today. Although this is a budget channel, I'm going to be talking more so about ones that personal preference kind of, you'll see. Let's jump into the next one with Urza, Lord High Artificer, which is, yes, again, another expensive commander. But that's not the reason that I personally do not want to own a deck built around Urza. Urza is a 1/4 human artificer that costs 2 blue. When he enters the battlefield, you get a 0/0 that gets bigger for each artifact you control. Then you can tap an untapped artifact you control to add blue, and by paying 5, you shuffle your library, you exile the top card, and you can cast it for free until the end of the turn. So, Urza does an absurd amount of things, and a lot of broken things. The most broken out of all the things is that tapping an untapped artifact you control to add blue. Now, I am definitely not one to say that I don't like artifact decks, because artifact decks can be very powerful in budget. In fact, Urza is one of my most powerful decks of all time. I don't pull it out too often because, yeah, Artifact Storm isn't exactly the most fun thing for many playgroups. Again, I've actually done an entire episode on why I don't play that deck too much anymore. But basically, Urza is kind of a step above that even. He turns every single one of your artifacts into basically a Mox, because now all of your artifacts can just tap for a blue. And yeah, that is a very powerful thing. Also, he gives you a place to put that mana, and even makes you an artifact when he comes into play to help you out, because yeah, he actually needed to do that. This is an overpowered commander, and yes, Urza is an incredibly powerful planeswalker in Magic lore, so having an incredibly powerful card for him makes sense, yes, but that doesn't mean I necessarily want to play around him. I did do a deck tech around Urza to kind of show how I would build the deck. I have not purchased that deck, and nor am I going to, or play with it. But basically, you know, using any kind of 0 mana cost artifacts could be incredibly powerful. Herbal Poultice is an example. It's essentially, again, a Mox, I believe, Sapphire is the blue one. Mox Sapphire with Urza in play, because you're basically, yeah, casting it for 0, and then you can just tap it for a blue, and yeah, you can get an incredible amount of mana with Urza. Ichor Wellspring, those kind of cantripping artifacts when they come into play can be really helpful with this kind of a deck. And of course, Winter Orb can be another thing as to why this deck isn't really kind of in my wheelhouse on decks I want to play. Winter Orb says as long as it's untapped, players can't untap more than 1 land during their untap steps. So this can shut all of the players down, basically. Slow them down to a crawl with kind of a stacks effect, making them not be able to untap a lot of their lands, the vast majority of their lands, except for you, because you can just tap it before your turn. And then, yes, you get to untap all your lands, and then this basically is a kind of a one-sided stacks piece for 2 mana with Urza. So yeah, this is a commander, not just because of kind of that stacks direction, but because it is so overpowered. It is very easy to build on a budget, which is a good thing. But also, again, it's kind of a commander where it can be a bit too easy to build. The deck kind of builds itself. You could probably just grab a handful of artifacts, chuck them in a deck for Urza, and it would still be very powerful regardless. Yeah, so again, Urza, an incredibly overpowered commander. Nothing against players who want to play with Urza. That's completely fine. I will play against your Urza deck. It's just that, yeah, you might be the #1 target before the game even starts because you've got Urza as your commander. Next up, let's go with Tulane, Teller of Tales, another commander that I personally am never going to own or have a deck with. Tulane is a 2/4 human druid that has vigilance, costing 2, green, white, blue. Whenever you cast a creature spell, draw a card, then you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. By paying 3 and tapping Tulane, you can return target creature you control to its owner's hand. This is kind of another, and we've seen this pattern lately, overpowered commander where they just kind of keep adding more and more things to it. The biggest piece, obviously, is that middle part. Whenever you cast a creature spell, draw a card, then put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. Those are the drawing and ramping are probably the two most powerful things in Commander that you can do. Getting card advantage as well as getting a hand on mana. And Tulane does both. And basically kind of just stapling all that kind of onto this one card makes it so, yes, you've got an incredible engine for both ramp and for card draw on one commander. And again, it's kind of one of those decks that might build itself a little bit. Obviously, you can do it in a more kind of fun, low-power version if you want, just kind of using your favorite creatures. But when you are kind of building this deck to be kind of optimal and kind of, the most powerful version of itself, you can use things like Shrieking Drake. Basically, it costs a blue. When it comes into play, you return a creature you control back to its owner's hand, so you're just going to return Shrieking Drake back to your hand over and over again. Just for a blue, you're basically draw a card, put a land into play. It's basically like a growth spiral on a creature because, you got Tulane in play. So you just kind of do Shrieking Drake over and over again. You're just going to, and those lands come into play untapped too. So basically, if you get an island, you're putting that into play, you can just, recast your Shrieking Drake essentially for free over and over again, drawing you more and more cards, ramping you further and further ahead of your opponents. It can become a little monotonous. There's other cards like White Mane Lion that do a very similar effect. Enters the battlefield, return a creature control back to your hand, and it's got Flash. So this one does cost 1 more, but it's got Flash, so it's got kind of that benefit to it. So basically a real growth spiral. Beast Whisper is another kind of way to give you even more card advantage. It says whenever you cast a creature spell, draw a card. So having kind of more of these effects, okay, instead of just drawing 1 card with Tulane, I get to draw 2. Now I'm, have a better chance to hit more lands. I have a better chance to ramp. This can become incredibly overpowered. It can be a very quick deck. And again, it's just a commander that the first time I saw it, I said, okay, they stapled all these things onto one commander. And, some people really like this commander, and that's great. It's just not one for me. So nothing against Tulane, but it's not one that I'm ever going to own. Another one that I'm never going to own is Vorniclex, Voice of Hunger, a 7/6 Praetor with Trample that costs 6 green. Whenever you tap a land for mana, add 1 mana to your mana pool of any type that land produced. And whenever an opponent taps a land for mana, that land doesn't untap or gets installers next untapped step. So, kind of like in a Winter Orby fashion, that is an effect that can really shut down players and can put you way ahead. So it's doubling up your mana and basically having your opponent's mana at the same time. This is a commander that the second that you see someone pull this out as their commander, you're probably going to get targeted again like an Urza, where, before the game even starts, you are probably public enemy number 1 just for having this as your commander. And not that I'm not okay with having a target on my back, before the game starts, but this one to me is just it can be a bit too mean for a lot of groups, and green has plenty of ways to get Vorniclex out at an absurd speed. Green is the color for ramp. Rampant growth, you can get, more and more lands so that you can take more and more advantage of Vorniclex, doubling up your land mana. Land of War Tribe, mana dorks that are incredibly efficient and effective. A 3 mana mana dork that taps for 3. If you're kind of, hitting, all your ramp efficiently, you can get Vorniclex out on turn, 3, 4, 5, and just basically kind of shut everyone else down and get you way ahead of everyone else. Even kind of land enchantments like Overgrowth can be helpful as well. Whenever enchanted land is tapped for mana, its controller adds additional green. So yeah, you're basically kind of just adding more and more mana, getting Vorniclex out quickly, and then finishing everyone off with a big spell or two. This is a commander that, yes, I love ramp decks. Yes, I love ramping. But when you're kind of ramping as well as hindering all your opponents, it can be something that is not nearly as fun for many players. So this is definitely a commander that I personally am going to avoid. Will I do a deck tech on it ever? If someone requests it, I will. But, yeah, it's not going to be one that I'm personally ever going to buy and own for myself. Next up, though, another commander that I personally am never going to buy and play with is going to be Grand Arbiter Augustin IV. A 2/3 human advisor that costs 2 white, blue. White spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. Blue spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. And spells your opponents cast cost 1 more to cast. So this is basically a commander that reduces the mana cost of the vast majority of your spells, and then also taxes your opponents and makes their spells cost more. A taxing kind of stacks, maybe Pillow Fort kind of deck is usually what you might see around this commander. And yeah, kind of taxing my opponents isn't exactly the kind of deck that I personally want to build around, and I've got nothing against stacks decks or, people playing stacks decks. It's just not one that I personally want to play. So, cards like a Spelltithe Enforcer, when you might see in this kind of a deck, whenever an opponent plays a spell, that player sacrifices a permanent unless they pay 1. Most decks aren't built around, being okay with sacrificing permanents, so you're basically kind of taxing them even more. So instead of having to pay 1 extra for your spells, now you gotta pay 2 extra for your spells. Other kind of hate bear effects like a Draenith Magistrate, your opponents can't cast spells from anywhere other than their hands, can be very problematic against certain decks specifically, but it can just be problematic in general against commanders because your commander isn't from your hands, so you're going to be casting them from your command zone. You can't do that until Draenith Magistrate is dealt with. Even Mind Sensor is another kind of a hate bear effect. If an opponent would search a library, that player instead searches the top 4 cards of that library instead. So if you have a fetch land, even like an Evolving Wilds, you better hope that you hit a basic land off your top 4, or that Evolving Wilds does nothing. And yeah, of course, this kind of gets rid of any kind of tutors or other kind of effects too. So shutting players down and kind of making it so they can't do things isn't something that I personally am going to be building a deck for. I'm not against players, playing these kinds of decks, but personally, this is not one for me. So let's move on to the final commander that I'm going to be talking about today with Lord Windgrace, a Planeswalker commander that starts off with 5 loyalty, and he costs 2 black, red, green. He has +2, discard a card, then draw a card. If a land card is discarded this way, draw an additional card. -3, return up to 2 target land cards from your graveyard to the battlefield. -11, destroy up to 6 target non-land permanents, then create 6 2/2 green cat warrior creature tokens with forest block. So Lord Windgrace is actually an incredibly popular commander. I know it was in the top 10 at one point. I'm not sure if it still is. And many people enjoy Lord Windgrace and other kind of Planeswalker commanders. I personally do not want to kind of build and play a Planeswalker commander deck. Again, I'm not against other players playing with Planeswalker commanders. It's just not a type of playstyle that I want for myself. Lord Windgrace, again, is a very powerful commander in a Lands Matters deck. You can use things like Harrow to sacrifice a land, and then you get more lands in the graveyard, then he can get them back. Rampaging Baloths is great for landfall, again, whether that's one of your ramp effects or even just Lord Windgrace's ramp effect too. An Evolution Sage, of course, can be fantastic with this, proliferating every single time a land comes into play under your control, getting more counters on your Lord Windgrace. And again, there are plenty of players out there that really enjoy Lord Windgrace, and other types of Planeswalker commanders, they're just not for me. And with that, this show is coming to a close, so it's my turn to hear from you. So, in the comments below, let me know if there's a commander that's on your list for one that you'll never own or never play with, and let me know why. So yeah, as always though, thanks again, and have a good one.